Hello, I'm Kyungjoon Park from the Security R&D team. In this session, I'll introduce the recently open-sourced LINE FIDO2 Server and talk about related information. I'm happy to share these stories with you. Before the presentation, let me introduce myself. I'm currently working as a security engineer, and I have been working with FIDO since 2015. This is the agenda for this session. First, I will explain what FIDO is. Then, I will tell you the history of our FIDO-related activities and why we release our output as open source. Also, I will share details about LINE FIDO2 Server. And I will talk about how to contribute to open source. Finally, I'm going to share about our future works. So, what exactly is FIDO? Let's move on to the next slide. FIDO stands for Fast Identity Online. Recently, when you use banking or pay apps on your mobile phone, you may be familiar with using your fingerprint or face to authenticate instead of a password. Among these authentication methods, there is currently the standard used by most services. This is called FIDO. Then, what's the reason we started using FIDO instead of password? The biggest reason is probably that passwords are not secure. Passwords are not safe. Cyber attackers around the world are always trying to steal your password. As you may know, personal information leakage due to password theft is one of the most common cyber crimes. To do this, attackers use several methods like social engineering, keylogging, phishing, rainbow table attack, and more. Again, your password is the main target for cyber attackers. FIDO is born to solve these security problems and give you a better user experience. This prevents most cyber attacks caused by password. It's a more advanced user authentication method. FIDO uses digital signatures instead of password to authenticate. Also, biometric information used for authentication is stored on your device. It means even if the server is hacked, there is no password and biometric information on the server. So, with FIDO, you can protect your sensitive personal information, and because it uses biometric authentication rather than complex password, the user experience is simpler and faster. Let me briefly explain how FIDO works. FIDO has basically two operations: registration and authentication. To perform FIDO authentication, you need to complete FIDO registration in advance. Registration is the process of generating an asymmetric key pair in your device's secure storage. Then, the private key is stored in the secure storage of your device. It is never exposed outside the secure storage and cannot access without matching the user's biometrics. And the public key is delivered and stored in the FIDO server. As I mentioned earlier, biometric information is stored on your device's secure storage. During the FIDO authentication, your device can access the private key only when you pass biometric authentication. This private key is used for digital signing a random value called a challenge delivered by the FIDO server. After that, the signed challenge value is returned to the server. Then, the server uses your public key to verify the digital signature. As a result, the server can know who you are. So, with FIDO, you can securely sign into any service without relying on a password. Now, let's talk about LINE's history and efforts to release FIDO2 Server as an open source. Since 2017, we have been conducting research and development and community activities for FIDO. Because LINE reaches users' personal information, we value user security the most. And we are making great efforts to spread our knowledge to the world. As a result, after several preparations, LINE FIDO2 Server was finally released as an open source this year. Let's take a closer look at the next slide. In 2017, LINE became a board member of FIDO Alliance and began research and development on FIDO. There are many reasons why we decided to become a board member. First, with FIDO, we wanted to solve issues related to LINE authentication, improve UX, and enhance the security of our many services. Second, we wanted to catch up with the latest specification trend and respond quickly. Third, through various activities such as working groups, we wanted to continue our research on secure user authentication with other participants. Also, we want to contribute our practice to related industries. LINE has attended FIDO working group and has been doing activities so far. Especially in FIDO Japan working group, Ichihara Naoisa, the senior manager of Security Center, has been in charge of the vice chair for a long time. In 2018, LINE has officially obtained FIDO Universal Server certification. It means that our server can support FIDO2, UAF, and U2F at the same time. To obtain this certification, we passed the FIDO interoperability test hosted by FIDO Alliance. This universal server was developed to support various internal requirements of LINE and is still used for LINE services. This server implementation is the predecessor of LINE's open source LINE FIDO2 server. The following year, 2019, LINE participated in FIDO Hackathon as a sponsor and mentor. We got a good result from the event. Our Mentee team won the top 3 award. They have implemented a system that can easily authenticate user identities using FIDO2, which connect kiosk and user phones through NFC. Therefore, if authentication is successful on the user's phone, the kiosk can obtain the user information from the server. There is no need to enter your information directly into the kiosk. This allows you to complete the product payment in 10 seconds at the kiosk. Also, at this time, FIDO authentication started to integrate into LINE services in earnest. LINE Pay first started using FIDO in Japan. Initially, LINE was used only in LINE Pay app, and after that, it was also used in in-app LINE Pay service of LINE app. In 2020, LINE began offering banking service in Thailand with FIDO, followed by Taiwan and Indonesia in 2021. We are proud to provide strong security and convenient UX to mobile banking users in many countries. In the same year, we successfully released LINE passwordless login feature with FIDO as well. Currently, you can use it to secondary LINE app login on iPad, Windows, and Mac without a password. When you are trying to log in, a push message to request FIDO authentication sent to your primary LINE app on Android or iOS. And when FIDO authentication is successful on your mobile phone, the login is automatically successful on your secondary LINE app. I'm sure you will find it very convenient and safe to use. This year, 2021, there also were activities. First of all, LINE attended as a judge in FIDO Developer Challenge. This event is an online competition that expanded the hackathon to all developers around the world. In the final, 15 teams joined and each showed excellent results. Not only were developers involved, but we were also inspired by this event. And we think it was an opportunity to recognize the many possibilities for the future of FIDO. The open source release that was the reason for today's session took place in August of this year. This will be covered in more detail in the next chapter. In addition, I would like to thank to LINE open source team for helping us. In the meantime, we continue to give presentations through LINE Developer Day to promote FIDO technology and our solutions. In 2019, we shared overall technical descriptions and work status through a session titled Strong Customer Authentication and Biometrics Using FIDO. And last year, we shared the background, history, and details of applying LINE passwordless login to the LINE service and also explained how it works. In another session titled Cross-Platform Mobile Security at LINE, we talked about FIDO as well as mobile security technologies on the client side. And it covered in detail the practical issues to consider when applying to services. If you are interested in any of these topics, please find and take a look. We've also made several posts on our progress on the LINE engineering blog. I think these activities are one of the good attempts to promote FIDO technology and benefit the ecosystem. In this chapter, I will explain in more detail about FIDO2 standard, and let's talk about LINE FIDO2 Server. FIDO currently has three standards. UAF is a passwordless authentication standard for Android and iOS. U2F is a standard to authenticate using a hardware key for strong security after entering a password. This method is called 2FA. These two specifications were first announced in 2014 and are still being used by many countries in their business. Lastly, FIDO2 is the most recently released standard. Until recently, FIDO was mainly used for either user authentication of mobile apps or 2FA. However, there was a need for web platforms. As a result, a new standard called FIDO2 was created. It can be used not only on mobile platforms, but also on the web, desktop, and so on. I'll talk more about FIDO2 in the next slide. FIDO2 consists of two specs, CTAP and WebAuthn. CTAP is a protocol for communication between a client and an external authenticator. Following this protocol, any authenticator can communicate with the client. WebAuthn is a specification for Web API that allows all web browsers to use FIDO2 in the same way. FIDO Alliance proposed it to W3C, an organization that defines web standard. As a result, it has been adopted as the web standard. So, most major web browsers support WebAuthn. It means that the browsers has a built-in FIDO2 client. This is the status of browsers that support FIDO2 on each platform. As you can see, most major browsers support FIDO2 authentication on multiple operating systems. In other words, FIDO2 is already prepared for a future without password for web users. And some platforms provide FIDO2 native API. It provides backward compatibility with FIDO2 as well. In conclusion, FIDO2 is an advanced standard that can be used on the web, along with the feature of UAF and U2F. From now on, I will share about all LINE FIDO2s one by one. As you can see, there are two major components, client and server part. The client part has a LINE FIDO2 combo that provides features for Android and iOS. In the server part, there is a LINE Party and LINE FIDO2 Server. LINE Party is assumed to be a server of any business service that will work with FIDO2 Server. For example, if FIDO is used for banking services, assume that the banking server is a LINE Party. Therefore, LINE Party does not handle the detailed logic of FIDO. Meanwhile, among them, we release the server part to open source. As I mentioned before, web browsers can also function as FIDO2 client. So, you can use them to connect with the server without a LINE FIDO2 client. Let's take a look at each module. Server is a FIDO2 server application. Spring Boot Starter is a module that wraps the server implementation in the form of a library. It can be conveniently imported to a new application. It also has examples of how to import and use it. RP Server is a Reline Party implementation. In the case of a Reline Party, since it is not possible to disclose the actual business server, so instead we have released a sample application with a test web page. Common is a collection of commonly used FIDO2-related message classes. Please see this picture for the stack of LINE FIDO2 Server. LINE FIDO2 Server is running on Spring Boot 2.4 version. Spring Boot has been used a lot recently and has various advantages. It's easy to manage because the configuration and dependency settings are simpler than the existing Spring framework. And there is a built-in web container, so you don't have to install the web container on your own. It runs on the Java platform. You can get the benefit of the diverse Java enterprise ecosystem. That's why we choose Spring Boot for our FIDO2 server. For the storage part, MySQL and H2 are supported as RDBMS and Redis is used as in-memory. In the case of service logic, behavior such as challenge, attestation, user key, session, metadata, and response are handled. For more detailed information, I advise you to take a look at our code. And I will introduce some additional features as well. Attestation is a means used to protect the user's public key delivered to the server during the registration process. There are many formats and types of this depending on the environment and purpose of each device. Our FIDO2 server supports everything specified in the current spec. Fact format of page type is attestation for general use in FIDO2. Except for none, the rest are dedicated to each device platform. And recently, Apple platforms started using FIDO2. To support them, we also implemented features for the Apple anonymous format and anonymization CA type. These types can be tested through the Safari browser. So now, I'm going to talk about how to run a server application. Referring to the capture screen, enter the command to run the server application. First, run the RP server. Then, run either server or LINE FIDO2 Spring Boot demo, depending on your purpose. Essentially, the behavior of both applications is the same. It's also recommended to run using IntelliJ. When the application starts, connect to localhost 8080 and open the test page. Then you can see the test page screen as follows. You can do several tests here. In the case of registration, the username and display name are required. You can test not only platform authenticators, but also external authenticators. Various optional functions can also be selected for testing. And to make it convenient to change the configuration, we are using a YAML file. In the case of IP server, if you want to change the port number, you can find it in application.yaml. And if you want to modify the settings related FIDO2 server to connect to, you can also change the settings of this file. If you want to edit the IP ID, check application-local.yaml. In the case of FIDO2 server, various settings can be changed by modifying application.yaml and application-local.yaml as well. Here, you can modify the port number, information required when using MDS, logging, and database-related configurations, and others. In addition, you can add initial data to database, such as IP ID and metadata for a specific authenticator. Let's see a demo that performs registration and authentication. You can check how the actual operation proceeds. First of all, this is registration. The following demo is about FIDO authentication. This is the end of this demo. Lastly, on this slide, let me briefly share the structure of LINE FIDO2 client. Both Android and iOS client use a shared module called LTSM. It has been implemented for use on multiple platforms. LTSM provides the ability to safely store and manage keys by using white box crypto and the security technologies of each platform. Additionally, the Android client can internally use the FIDO2 native API for its purpose. Then, I'll talk about how you can contribute code to our project and something you should know. First of all, this is the address to our repository. You can go to the repository of the LINE FIDO2 server through the link. If you visit this repository for the first time, we recommend that you read the README file. There are descriptions of FIDO, many screenshots, and additional information. You can also check the FIDO certificate obtained from FIDO Alliance, and contributing file is also important. There are information and links you need to make an open source contribution. So please read and understand. Additional documentation can be found in the wiki section. We plan to continue adding documents in the future. So please continue to pay attention to this. To contribute, check the issue menu first. Please take a look at what the issues are here. Good burst issues are friendly to try if you are new. I think it would be better for you to focus on them, or if you need something new or find a bug, you can create an issue yourself. If you create a PR for code contribution, there is one more thing you need to check. This is a license document for code contribution. You must sign this document. When these steps are completed and your PR arrives, we will begin to review your code. It will not take long to get our feedback. When all reviews are completed, your PR will be merged. We look forward to your participation. Now, let's talk about our future works. We divided our future works into two parts: internal works for LINE service and a plan as an open source project. I will say both. This is our plan as an open source project. First, we plan to add new features. Apple Passkey support is one of our considerations. We are also going to reinforce technical materials. We know that to be widely used as an open source, we need to share a lot of information. We are also considering making some modules, a library, and distributing them to a public repository. Overall, we will continue to manage and improve to become a better open source project. Let me explain the roadmap inside LINE. We have planned to expand FIDO2 to more LINE services. We also plan to enable authentication on multiple platforms as well as mobile, so we are going to integrate with them. To this end, we will continue to share our knowledge and know-how on FIDO with other service teams. So, LINE has made great effort to protect your information and provide a better user experience. FIDO was also introduced due to such considerations. We will continue to work hard to protect your privacy. Also, we will always share our result with you. And I ask for your love and interest in our open source. Thank you.